3 criminal investigations, 1 judicial sort of independent inquiry, and 1 application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, all going on at the same time. So we can look at how they all interlink, because I think the question people have is, well, surely won't this have new developments, won't they have some effect on all the appeals, etc., etc.? I mean, to cut to the chase, no, they won't, but let me explain why. So what are the investigations? First of all, there is one continuing into Lucy Letby herself. They're examining further suspicious deaths. I know you'll all have your own views on that in the comments, both at the original hospital but also where she first trained. There's also an investigation into the potential criminal liability of individuals at the health trust and the hospital. There's also a criminal inquiry into whether there's a potential corporate manslaughter charge against the trust or the hospital. We all know that there's the inquiry going on, which is looking into how did this happen. But of course, it's based on the premise that something went wrong, and these poor children, that something happened to them. And I know a lot of people are disputing that. And part of that is there's the current application, which has now gone into the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which is based on, quote, new evidence, in that they've gone to a series of experts and said, all of you look at some of these specific cases and tell us what you think. And they've come back and said, well, we don't think there's anything suspicious anyway. So that's where we are. So what's happened? Well, first of all, 3 managers at the hospital have been arrested, and they've been arrested for gross negligence manslaughter. So let me explain what that is. Effectively, that is where an individual performs an act or commits an omission, which, as a result of which, somebody suffers ultimate consequences. So you don't necessarily have to show that you did an actual act. Now, this is very interesting, and this goes all back to the old days of people being injured on railways. Because it used to be that in criminal law you could only be liable for acts. In other words, you could only be liable for things you did. You couldn't be liable for things you didn't do. But when the railway started, there were a series of basically fate acts on the railway, because railway staff had done things like fail to do proper signalling or lighting and things like that. People had failed to close level crossings back in the day when they were all manual, and they were prosecuted. Like the individuals would be prosecuted, so they'd prosecute a station master for saying, you didn't put the signal to the right place. And the defence was, well, you can't prosecute me because I failed to put the signal in the right place. I didn't actually. It's not like I went, had I have gone and put the wrong signal on, well, yes, that would have been an act that was, unnecessarily risky or unlawful and caused somebody to suffer the consequences. But, me not doing the signal, you can't prosecute me for that. So what they did is the law changed, and it introduced the idea for liability for omissions. But that only arises where you owe a duty of care to somebody. So say, for instance, I'm stood here, I'm on the cliff tops now, and I see some blind person walking through the edge of the cliff. Am I under any obligation to sort of give them a warning? No, I'm actually not. I mean, obviously, that would be the nice thing to do. But you're not. What, however, if you were a parent of a child, and the child was getting too close to the edge of the cliff and you didn't do anything? Well, in that particular case, you are deemed to owe them a duty of care. So you can actually be guilty of an omission for not warning them. And how duties of care arises, the idea is that it should be something where you should know that, yes, my actions would have an effect on this person. But also, so like when you're driving, you all other road users a duty of care and things like that. So stuff like failing to maintain a proper lookout, that's an omission. But if that causes an accident, then you can be done for that. You can also you can sort of acquire a duty of care. And that's going to sound really awful, but say, for instance, you see somebody needing help in the street or something like that. You can't just walk past them if you want, you're not committing an offence. But if you go to help them, then you are deemed to have assumed a duty of care towards them. So if you start helping them and then go, you know what, I wish I'd not bothered with this, I'm just going to leave them there. Arguably then, you didn't sort of continue to take care of them. Then arguably then you have committed an offence because you'd assumed the duty of care and now you've abandoned it. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, hospital managers are deemed to owe a duty of care to the people who use their hospitals. Obviously, now that they have been arrested, legal proceedings are clearly contemplated. So all the contempt of court stuff kicks in, so I'm not going to speculate anything. I'm just going to say that that's what they have been charged with. Does that have an effect on any of the appeals or anything like that? Because what if they say, what if their defence is, yes, well, our defence is there's no duty of care because none of the children, actually suffered as a result of anything we did, because there were in fact no moiders. Now, yeah, it might be they raised that, but unless and until they put in a defence case statement, if there was, say, for instance, it was something like, yes, we actually conspired to frame this person to cover up all our, incompetence, then arguably that would be something that the CPS would have to disclose to Letby's lawyers to say, you might want to do something with this. But at the moment, if it's just a case of we're just saying that, we could have spotted it or anything like that, well, no, it doesn't raise any new issues. It's a completely separate prosecution, and it has no effect whatsoever. And it'll be interesting, because when it starts, of course, though, everything will be up for grabs. So we have this idea of issue estoppel, where if a competent court has already ruled on a factual issue and said this happened and that happened, then you're stuck with it. But that's only binding on the parties, and obviously none of these people were parties, defendants or anything in the original trial. So it all starts again. So it will be for the prosecution as part of their case. They would have to establish that these children died as a result of their incompetence because they allowed somebody to carry out this. So they actually have to prove the carrying out bit. It may well be that the defence say we're not challenging her convictions, we're just saying we couldn't have spotted it in time or anything like that. But like I say, that's all speculation at the moment, and that's why I wasn't going to comment on it, because we just don't know. All we know is some people have been arrested. But will this have any effect on the Criminal Cases Review Commission stuff or any potential appeals? At this stage, absolutely not.
You could part exchange your...
More baby deaths and collapses. Killer nurse Lucy Letby could face new charges over more baby deaths and collapses at hospitals where she worked. Letby is already serving 15 whole-life orders after being found guilty of murdering 7 children and attempting to murder 7 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Natalia Hokara joins us now. Good evening to you, Natalia. Just tell us more about these alleged crimes then.
Well, this is all part of an investigation that goes back to 2023, well after Lucy Letby was convicted. Well, we know now that Cheshire Police had handed a full file of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service. It relates to new allegations of baby deaths and non-fatal collapses, not just at the Countess of Chester Hospital, where Letby was convicted, but also at Liverpool Women's Hospital, where she worked and trained. It's all part of Operation Hummingbird, the police investigation into neonatal incidents dating back to 2012.
OK, and just talk to us about how this is different, how this is a different stage compared to what's come before.
Well, this is the first time that the CPS is formally considering whether to bring further charges against Letby. It follows a decision by the police back in March to widen the scope of their investigation. In a statement, the CPS said, "We will now carefully consider the evidence to determine whether any further criminal charges should be brought. As always, we will make the decision independently based on the evidence and in line with our legal test." There are no details yet on how many cases are involved or indeed how long this process could take. And it comes just a day after 3 former senior managers at the Countess of Chester Hospital were arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. They've since been released on bail. Now, a public inquiry into how Letby was able to carry out her crimes is still ongoing, with its findings due in early 2026.
OK, Natalia, for now, thank you very much.
Lucy Letby case after an international... Sir Jeremy Hunt is calling for an urgent re-examination of the Lucy Letby case after an international panel of experts presented evidence that the baby's deaths and injuries were due to natural causes or errors in medical care.
The neonatal nurse was given 15 life sentences last year for murdering 7 babies and the attempted murder of 7 others. The report has been passed to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, but the former Health Secretary wants the whole process to be sped up. And Sir Jeremy Hunt joins us live from Westminster. Very good morning to you. This is a very sensitive and highly distressing case because, of course, there are the families of the babies who died and the babies where attempted murder was the conviction, who constantly feel like their pain is being aggravated by people saying she may not be, Lucy Letby may not be the person, or indeed if anyone was responsible. Why are you now taking it on yourself to intervene?
Morning, Susanna. Morning, Ed. You are absolutely right. This is a really, really difficult case because those families have suffered the worst thing that could happen to any family, losing a child, absolutely indescribable horror. And they will be wanting closure, and they may have hoped the conviction of Lucy Letby would give them that closure. And that's why I have avoided saying anything about this case at all until very recently, even though these tragic deaths happened when I was Health Secretary. But I do think that the thing that we owe those families more than anything else is the truth. And there is now some very disturbing evidence that maybe, and I make no judgment about this because I don't think politicians should second-guess the courts, but maybe that conviction was unsafe. So without passing judgment as to whether that is right or not, we need the Criminal Cases Review Commission to do a very speedy review so that those families find the answer one way or another.
Can I ask, what is at the heart of your worries? Because it could be that you have looked in detail at the Letby case and the evidence, and it's raised questions in your mind, and that would be understandable. There are many people who have had the same reaction. But also, during the time when you were Health Secretary, you won't have known about Lucy Letby and the details of that maternity unit. But we do know there were a number of maternity units around the country where things were going wrong. And is it your worry that, in this case, an individual has been scapegoated, possibly, for what we now know in other places were more systemic issues in quality of care?
Spot on, Ed. That is exactly the worry, because every day in the NHS we have 3 baby deaths, tragically, and about 5 stillbirths. And these are absolutely awful moments. And often they are caused by medical error. They could have been avoided if things had been done differently. And if that's happened, in this case, at the Countess of Chester, then what we need to do is to learn why it happened and make sure we learn the lessons so that it's not repeated. And I think it is the fact that we've had these maternity scandals at Morecambe Bay, East Kent, Nottingham, Shrewsbury and Telford, many other parts of the NHS, that's leading some people to worry that maybe what happened at the Countess of Chester was an NHS-wide issue with the way we do maternity care, which I know is a big concern of Wes Streeting's at the moment, and I'm hoping we'll hear more about that in the NHS 10-year plan that we're expecting next week. But I think that is the issue. If this was medical error, we need to know so that we can learn from those mistakes.
This is Maya. Maya needs to act fast to make the most of our British summer. Thankfully, with a snap of her Galaxy S25, Phone Hub, and Help Me Write on Chromebook Plus, Maya can get everyone together in no time.
A very serious issue you are raising, Sir Jeremy Hunt, because you're absolutely right. There are inquiries in other units and failings have already been found in other units. But if you're suggesting that one nurse is taking criminal responsibility because there was a failing at the unit, I mean, what does that say about the way that that unit was being run and what other people said about Lucy Letby?
Yes, and I need to be clear, I'm not saying that about Lucy Letby. I think it's very important that independent experts in our legal system review the case so that they can tell us the answer to that. But the reason why I think they need to do that review is because we've had these 14 experts led by Professor Shu Lee from the University of Toronto, someone completely independent. On that team were people like Professor Nina Modi, who was president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health when I was Health Secretary. These are people who've got no personal or financial interest in the case. But they are saying that there is no medical evidence in the 17 deaths that were examined in the trial of what they call malfeasance, of malicious intent. And so if they are saying that, then I really think we need to do this. Now, the key issue is that the Criminal Cases Review Commission is unbelievably slow. You may remember the case of that man, Andrew Wilkinson, who was convicted of rape, and that was overturned. It took them more than a decade to get their act together on that. Even though there was DNA evidence they could have looked at much more quickly. So what I'm saying is they need to really get their skates on, because this is such a big issue for the families involved. It's causing them such agony. We all want to know an answer, but we need to find out quickly.
Can I take you, I know we have a short of time, to another very big issue in the news today, the Welfare Reform Bill. You have a book out. You wrote a very thoughtful article in The Economist just a week or so ago, in which you point out there's been a huge rise in the number of people claiming disability benefits. Mental health claims account for more than half of the post-pandemic increase in disability benefits. You say this may be the unintended consequence of legislation you brought in, the Care Act, when you were Health Secretary, where you were trying to treat mental and physical health equally, but you worry that's had an unintended consequence, a big rise in people receiving welfare benefits. Could you just explain that to us?
Sure. I mean, I really hope that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves stick to their guns, because we've got a massive problem in the welfare system at the moment. More than half the growth in working age adult claims is for mental health reasons. And when I was Health Secretary, you know, every doctor would say that if you have anxiety or depression, the thing you need more than anything else is social contact. And what we should be saying when people have mental illness is we're going to get you treated, not we're going to put you on benefits, sign you off having to look for work, because I think if anything that makes the anxiety and depression worse. So we need to fix that problem, because I think we are doing a disfavour to people with mental illness by parking them on benefits.
But you're not saying that they haven't got a mental illness. You're saying that treating it in the NHS is a good thing, but seeing that in the welfare system as a reason to sign you off work, that's the mistake.
Yes, and also, by the way, it would be a fraction of the cost to treat them. You know, the disability bill is going up by nearly £50 billion over the 5 years of this Parliament compared to pre-pandemic levels. But for £1 billion, you could actually double the number of people we treat for anxiety and depression in the NHS. So much cheaper and better for the individual to treat them quickly rather than park them on benefits.
Jeremy Hunt, former Health Secretary, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. On the point of the Criminal Cases Review Commission, they said they will not be commenting. And a spokesperson for the Countess of Chester Hospital said due to the Thirlwell inquiry and ongoing police investigations, it would not be appropriate to comment further at this time.